Hey, welcome to the long game. This is Ross Cagan. I'm Regis Professor of Precision Medicine at University of Glasgow, and we are on a mission to demystify the science that shapes our lives and to unpack how great ideas built right here in Scotland become real-world medicines, devices, and new companies at the cutting edge of life sciences.
And I'm Sandy Weir, Tech Innovation Leader and Strategic Program Manager, joining today from Edinburgh.
Hey, Sandy. How you doing, my friend?
Ross, I'm really good. It's really good to be back together again on the podcast. I hope you are too.
Yeah.
We've both been traveling far and wide recently, and it's time to bring that new knowledge back and that new experience to the pod.
Very quickly, where have you been? I know we'll hear a little bit about it later.
Well, I guess June was busy, so I was in Minneapolis, and then I was very nicely on vacation in Hong Kong, and then I was in my brother-in-law's 60th in London just the weekend.
That's awesome.
What about yourself? Tell us where you've been.
Let's see. Well, Kobe, New York, I think I talked about recently. And then I think the next one, I'm losing track, a little bit of traveling here and there, but the main one was 10 days in Nigeria. My wife and I taught at a workshop there, and it's actually a center that we've been working with and supporting over the last decade. It's to train young Nigerian scientists in the way of the fly. It's really amazing. I always come back from there both excited and inspired. It's its own podcast, but yeah, that's where we were. It's an interesting country.
Yeah, I've been following your posts on this, and it's just incredible what you're doing there. And I hope you agree with me. Travel definitely broadens the mind, and something we can bring back to share on the podcast.
Yeah, absolutely, of course. Well, Sandy, on the long game, we explore the collision of cells, code, and capital in the Scottish life sciences sector. So today, we're putting on a magnifying glass directly on the capital part of that equation. We're going to demystify the financial framework that every single bio-entrepreneur has to navigate if they want to get their science out of the lab and into a patient. And this is something we have been asked a lot about.
Yeah, indeed, Ross. And if you're an academic listening, you're probably very used to the process of writing grant funding proposals. But venture capital funding is a completely different beast. And I'm sure you agree with that, Ross. You'll hear terms like pre-seed, Series A, Series B, dilution. It sounds like a completely foreign language sometimes.
Yeah, no, and actually it is. And I, as a scientist who then started some companies, had to learn this language. Of course, like all languages, it's always changing. What people care about is always changing. And the reality is in biotech, you can have the best science. It can be absolutely brilliant. But if you don't understand how the funding pipeline works, your company will die a slow and agonizing death. And I just had this conversation with students over in Nigeria because I think this should be mandatory for all scientists. I suspect you agree with this. And that is, even if you don't want to start a biotech company, you have to understand how to do research so that it can get to the patient. Otherwise, you're publishing papers, but you're not actually aiming at the patient. This is 2026. I think we should all, grow up and know something about that. So I don't have to grow up. I'm still be a little baby scientist, which is why I love about science. We can still be children. But Sandy, you are the financial translator here. So what we're going to do today, everybody, we're going to walk through the entire life cycle of a startup's funding. We're going to talk about the very first check that you receive, all the way to exit. This is actually going to be a two-part series. And in our next episode, we'll take a look at what it takes to raise money here in Scotland in 2026. What do you think?
Yeah, I'm sure my bank manager will be thrilled at the thought of me being the financial translator. However, yeah, we'll be breaking down why funding a biotech company is so completely different and so expensive compared to funding a sort of standard research tech startup. So yeah, let's get into it, Ross.
All right, let's do this. So let's start at the beginning. Let's keep this very simple. I'm a researcher at University of Glasgow. I have yet another brilliant idea for a new cancer therapeutic, and I want to start a company. Okay. So I didn't want to start a company, but people talked to me and said, hey, you want to get this to patients? You have to start a company. Tell me, Sandy, what is step one?
Well, step one is usually called bootstrapping, Ross. And I guess it's a bit of an odd phrase. It's one of these things that's got its origin in the military, quite literally pulling oneself up by the bootstraps, these small loops that are attached to tall boots.
Actually, I
But I
didn't
guess
know that.
yeah, yes, but I guess a deeper meaning relates to self-reliance, achieving success, and doing that through your own resources. So this is the pre-funding stage. It's when you're using your own savings, you're maximum out your credit card, you're relying on funding and help from family and friends. Essentially, you're building and growing your company primarily using your own resources, your own money, and revenue that can be generated by the business. That's hard in medtech, biotech to generate money straight away, but other tech startups can do this. Much more difficult in our world. But rather, we do this rather than raising substantial external investment at this stage. So no external institutional funding. Your company might just be a name and a patent application, Ross.
Yeah, and what I discovered was these friends and families and all that stuff is that investors really like to know that you're willing to put, quote, skin in the game. They like that because that means you're serious. So it's not mandatory. I haven't done it for every company, but when we have done it, VCs and others like that because we can say, look, I have confidence in this. I think it's going to work. However, because we're scientists, we're not rich. That money will run out fast, especially if we're doing like medical stuff. So at what point, this is, I think, really we're going to lean into you, Sandy. What point does me as the naive scientist, when do I start asking investors for cash?
Yeah, well, that brings us to the next stage, the kind of pre-seed and seed funding rounds. So pre-seeding is about your proof of direction. You're raising perhaps a small amount of money. Often that's through angel investors to validate your idea, maybe plan what your minimal viable product will be, your MVP. And by the way, in this case, if you're not familiar, an angel investor tends to be a sort of wealthy individual who has a special interest, who invests their own money in an early stage startup, usually in exchange for some equity and shares in the company. Angels often invest before venture capital firms are willing to do so. They're willing to take a bit more risk, and they'll provide things like business advice and mentoring. They'll have a really extensive contacts book, so they'll be able to introduce you to other people. They'll help you with things like introducing you to perhaps new staff or help with recruitment, finding customers, maybe even some support when you go into that later stage fundraising. So, for example, an angel in the UK might invest up to £100,000 for maybe like a 10% ownership in a startup.
So can I ask, not ask, in the angels, the
Mm.
lore I know of is that you have to be very careful about what angel you pick. That just sometimes we're desperate and we're like, I'll take any money that shows up here. But what do you have to look for in an angel, I guess is my question.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's a really good point. You're really looking for someone that you can work with. So trust is an important thing. Is this someone that's been introduced from your own contact group? Someone that knows that this individual has been able to help someone else in similar position in the past? What are their motives? Are they trying to take too much equity out of the business? I think if an angel can come to you with a strong recommendation from someone else in your group that has experience before, I think that's usually a really good sign, Ross. But absolutely, you're right. You need to be cautious at this stage.
Yeah, my understanding is exactly as you say, experience is important because some angels think that this is the same as investing in like software and that they're going to get a return in 4 months. And I think they have to have enough experience.
Yes, exactly. So experience of biotech, medtech, understanding what that cycle looks like. Yeah, taking a long game view, Ross, perhaps.
Well, hopefully they're listening to our podcast.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Right. So I guess that's the pre-seed. So we start thinking about what the seed round looks like, and I guess this term literally comes from agriculture. This time, you're planting a seed capital, and you're hoping that that's going to grow so it can generate more cash. In a normal tech company, a seed round is about proving market demand. In the UK, a typical seed investment ranges from around 100K to £2 million. So really, it's leading that next round of funding that's going to allow you to grow and expand and as I say, be able to prove the market demand.
Yeah, and so this is where biotech really diverges from standard software. We're going to
Yeah,
dig into this a little bit. If you're building like I don't know, a food delivery app, $2 million is a lot of money to build the app, get thousands of users, all that stuff. That can go a long way, especially if you're doing it all by yourself. But if I'm building a therapeutic drug, $2 million barely gets me out of the starting blocks. Yeah.
exactly, Ross. From a clinical side, can you maybe explain, why early stage biotech needs more cash and to prove the concept? Take us through that from your experience.
Yeah, so I'm not going to be able to do a complete job just on this podcast. It's probably its own podcast, all the things that are required, and I'm sure we'll do that podcast. But I would say let's start with not just how expensive it is, but why it is so different than say software. And I remember, so I came to Glasgow from Icahn School of Medicine, Mount Sinai in New York City. And not long after I arrived there, they brought in a guy, Jeffrey Hammerbacher. He's famous as the so-called data god of Facebook. He's one of the early employees at Facebook. I think Jeffrey did pretty well for himself there, so he didn't really need money. In his late 20s, he came to Sinai. Um, and the idea was he was going to bring his computer chops to medicine, which was pretty cool. I think it was really insightful of Sinai to do that. And anyway, the reason I'm bringing this up is, so he was the perfect person to ask the question, what's the difference between, say, Silicon Valley and medical research? And I remember his answer, which was, in Silicon Valley, you would make some software, some cool software. You would toss it out there and call it a beta, and people would try it out. You even have some beta triers, right? You could sign up for, and they would try stuff out, and then they would send it back and say, "Man, it's kind of glitchy. You got to change this, that sort of thing." And you would do some back and forth, and then you would finally wrap up the final product and ship it out. In medicine, you can't do that. There's no, as Jeffrey put it, there's no beta testing. You don't send it out there, try it out on a patient, and it's glitchy, so you lost the patient, but we'll send it back and play around with some more. It's not how it goes. You get one shot at a clinical trial. So there is an enormous wall of stuff that leads up to that clinical trial, and that wall is expensive. So in other words, regulatory safety, things like that, that costs quite a bit of work. It's what we call in the business an IND enabling studies, investigational new device or drug enabling study. So before you're ever allowed to test a new drug on a human being, you have to submit an IND application to the regulators. To get that approval, you have to run a battery. And you know this very well, Sandy, so I'm saying this to the audience. You have to run a really exhaustive preclinical safety data. You have tox assessments, metabolic stability tests. There is quite a long list, often called the ADME or ADMET set of tests. And what they all come down to is you have to put a lot of money in, usually to an independent company eventually, that will test everything and make sure that it's not likely to stop the heart. It's not likely to just bind up your plasma and go away, all these sorts of things. So there's a lot of things you have to think about. So if I'm developing a small molecule, and this is why it's hard to go start a company and go all the way into trials by yourself, these IND enabling studies just themselves, after you've done all of the science and you have your lead and all that stuff, that can easily take 12, 18 months or more. That can cost 1.5 to over $3 million easily. I would say easily. If it's a complex biologic, if it's an antibody drug conjugate, that cost will double or triple. And that's just to get up to the starting line of the phase 1. You haven't even recruited a patient yet. Forget the costs of all the clinical coordinators and all that, just to get to that point. is going to cost you many millions. And this is why you have to think about funding. Yeah.
Yeah. Hopefully, any of those angel investors that are listening haven't turned off at this point, and they
Yeah.
understand that the potential benefits, and you get this right, really outweigh the opportunity in this case is really enormous. So that's why we do it. That's the cherry on the cake.
No, of
But
course.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
So I was just going to say, I just wanted to jump in because now I really do want to hand this back to you, which is, hey, where is Scottish founder actually going to find this kind of early stage money?
Yeah, that's it's a very, very good question. And I guess one of the advantages that we have in the UK are some of the state funding bodies that can provide some bridging around that funding. So, I mean, typically, I think in the UK, angel investors, and then even when we go to the seed rounds, we're starting to generate potential investments, which are a lot less than we would expect in the US, for example. And we really expect our state funding to be able to kind of bridge some of that gap and create a more level playing field and do that strategically so that they're investing in technology, which we think is going to be significant economic opportunity for the UK and of significant benefit to patients as well. So I guess that's where I see the bridge. It's not a very satisfactory answer, Ross, because of course there's a lot of pressure on government spending. And
Yeah.
these are difficult times that we're in at the moment. But of course, the alternative is you take your idea to another geography that does have the investment and the capital to be able to make your idea work.
Yeah. So I think what you're describing is entering that valley of death that everybody hears about.
Yeah.
And I think it's getting overused, including by me, because we talked about the second wave in an earlier episode of a Valley of Death. You get that initial funding, and then what do you do? We'll get back to that. But
Yeah.
as you say, it's we're doing this because it's important.
Mm,
Okay. Is it? I'm just curious. Is it more expensive to do it here than it is in, say, the U.S., which is probably the largest effort set in China? And are there differences before we get into more of the details? I just want to get a little more experience from you on exactly comparing the two, because you do have insights in that. Yeah.
yeah, no, it's fascinating, isn't it, to look at and compare the differences, Ross? Um, I guess my view is that there are benefits and disadvantages in the UK and similarly in the US. In the US, as you know, there's a very rich framework of opportunity for phase one, phase two, and so forth, clinical trials. I think more clinical trials are being conducted in the US than any other geography. But then in the UK, we've got the benefit of the NHS and the world renowned reputation that we have here for doing good science and doing good validation and bringing things through that NHS route that really shown to work. So using the UK as essentially as the proving ground, but maybe not the final market opportunity, and then aligning with another geography to provide the scale that's required in order to be able to truly bring something to market. I guess we're in the fortunate position that we can maybe play both sides of the coin. I don't know. What do you think, Ross? Is that a fair assessment?
I think it is. Another way to say it is the U.S. has more resources. It's more chaotic. It's more competitive.
Mm,
The UK is more organized in some ways. Certainly, the healthcare data is way more
yeah,
organized, um, and
good
that
point.
actually matters.
Mm,
Um, and yeah, and it's generally recognized, like the U.S. The UK is generally recognized as having elite universities, and so companies do like to locate here. I was just also down south, if I'm allowed to say the E word, England, and checking out some of the companies there. And, they do like being there because there's a lot of smart people, well educated here in Scotland and down in
yeah,
England. So yeah, it's got advantages and disadvantages exactly as you say. And I
yeah.
think that these days to move back and forth is pretty straightforward. I do
So,
think nurturing a young company is probably a little easier here in terms of
yeah.
actually doing it, but because the culture is not as deep there, it's harder to figure out how to do it, and that's why we have this podcast. You know?
Exactly, and two more points to this. One in terms of startup costs, and we've touched on this a little bit before. Our costs in terms of staff, resourcing, etc., are so much less than the
Yeah,
US. If
that
you're
is
trying to do
100% true.
this, if you're
Yeah,
trying to do a biotech startup, a medtech startup in the Bay Area, San Francisco, you're going to need pretty deep pockets because those staff are going to be expensive.
they are.
I like to think that in Scotland, certainly, and more generally in the UK, we've got really talented individuals, but they're considerably less expensive. And I think, that presents a fantastic advantage. The other thing is that we're incredibly lucky in the UK to have a very mature angel investor network. So Archangel's one of the kind of really foremost angel investor networks based in Edinburgh, considered to be the oldest angel investment syndicate in the world. Even in a tight market today, Archangels are leveraging something like 41 million for Scottish scale ups in 2025 alone. So they've backed companies like Neuronics with £6.1 million seed round funding. I think it's not medtech, but C Signum also they got around 6 million in Series A funding. So I think incredible advantages that we might have here in Scotland. What do you think, Ross?
Well, you said the S word, series.
Yeah.
So first of all,
Oh yeah, we
yes.
better come back. Let's come back. Let's come back. I've
Exactly.
jumped
So
in.
you're saying all this crazy jargon, man. So let's talk about it. All right. So yeah, what I think is I've seen all of this, and it is basically as easy and as difficult to do biotech here as it is in the States. It's just different. Um, so let's talk about series,
Yeah.
because we promised it. This is basically scientist biotech 101. So there's Series A, Series B, Series C, etc. In the venture capital world, Series A is all about proof of scalability. So you're not doing experimentation anymore. So once you've entered the series round, so you'll hear pre-seed rounds as you talked about, and that is getting money. I'm still trying to get my compound to look good. I'm trying to get through IND, that sort of thing. When you're ready to actually move forward, either towards clinics or hopefully soon into clinics, you hit the series. Series A is usually what funds your phase 1 trial, sometimes phase 2A. And a lot of times, pharma, if they're going to buy you, they're going to grab you after phase 2A. That's sort of the lore, is that they wait to phase 2A, then they have a real sense of whether this is going to work or not. So what we're talking about is you're raising somewhere in the range of, say, 2 to something like 10 million pounds. I was going to say dollars, pounds. Um, of course, this can be much higher if you're doing antibodies, and so on. It can be lower if you're doing devices, but you're basically in that several million pound range. So you're no longer dealing with angel investors. They've got their cut. What you're doing is you're bringing in institutional venture capital, or VCs, venture capital firms. And I should also add to that, that you should know that if you are part of a university, which I am, not only do your angel investors have part of your company, your institution has part of your company. And I'm going to some point in this podcast series have a long and angry rant at how little they should be taking, but I will not do that now. So we've got Series A, we've got our venture capitals that are now capital firms that have stepped in.
Yeah, and this is a great point, Ross, in which to, because I think a lot of budding entrepreneurs out there, they kind of understand that pre-seed and seeding round, and it gets scary once you get venture capitalists
Yeah.
involved, once you get into these Series A, Series B, etc. And one of the big concerns, of course, is that they start to leak. The founder's ownership starts to diminish, or the perception is their ownership is diminishing. So what happens when these VCs come in? Can you tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah. So, and there's two lines of thought on how you should react to this, because what we're talking about is dilution. So every time you raise a new funding round, somebody takes a piece of your pie. right? You're basically selling a percent of your company. So if you started at 100% at the seed stage because you got friends and family, by the time you reach Series B, if you are lucky, you'll own 20%. And I would say that's if you're lucky. I think 5 to 10% is probably a more real world. But anyway, um, and there's two ways to view that. One, they're just taking it away from you, or another is you're getting a smaller percent of a much larger pie. And so just have to be very smart about this. And so two lessons on this. One, dilution is inevitable. So just, understand that. But losing your company's vision is optional. So you don't have to give up what's driving it forward.
Mm.
This comes down to how you construct your board. But the other thing I would say that you need to understand, I needed to learn, is that you shouldn't be running your own company, certainly not in terms of the business of it. You need a business person. Most of these little companies survive or die based on their business plan, not so much their science. Would you agree?
Yeah, that's really, really good advice and good insight, Ross. So let's talk about Series B then. So if Series A is about proving that the drug or the med tech device actually works in small groups of humans in a initial clinical trial, what does Series B look like?
Yeah. So if you've gotten to Series B, congratulations. Now, the path forward is both more clear and your chance of success is starting to tip up. So in cancer, you're in the 3 to 4% range until you get up to Series B, and then it starts to tip up pretty significantly. So you're still not, 50%. So Series B is basically you're really expanding the effort now. You're very disciplined now. That the path forward is very clear. Usually you've selected what patient group. If you need biomarkers to identify the patient group, you have those biomarkers. You're running a very large scale, multi-center. And when we ran a trial, when I'm trying to get a trial run, we have 3 different places. That's what I mean by multi-center, 3 different hospitals, phase 3 clinical trial. Okay. So you have to build manufacturing infrastructure. Who's making
Yeah,
that compound, right? And just to remind everybody, it's not a drug until it's FDA approved. It's actually a compound.
yeah,
Who is making that compound? It can't be in your lab. Okay. So that is its own world that we'll talk about. And typical investments here, now we're in the 10, 20, 50 million pound range. Just to give an example, here in Scotland, a later stage funding, it's actually a number of examples we've already talked about. One is Biotech. It's a clinical stage microbiome company. Actually, what they do is pretty interesting. But to my point, they recently just completed a 27 million pound funding round, supported by new and existing investors. So that usually no one person will give you those 27 million. It's usually a basket of investors. There's a so-called lead investor and then others that support that investor. And this then allows Biotech to scale up. Yeah.
yeah. I got it, Ross. And I mean, I've always thought about it as, the transition to Series B is taking it out of the lab and really looking at those manufacturing processes that allow you to scale the development of that compound, as you say. It's not FDA approved. It's not a drug yet. It's not FDA approved. It's not a device you can take to market yet. But you're now having to demonstrate the sort of manufacturing route. And if you keep growing, if you're if you're incredibly successful, you've got to the beyond the dizzy heights and beyond Series B, and you start hitting Series C and beyond. Yeah, not only are you someone that we definitely want you to come on to our podcast and tell us all about that success and how you've done that.
Yeah.
Really, this is you're looking at this is a relatively mature company now, and you're looking for your place in a global market and how you might be able to dominate in that global market. And you're really kind of preparing your balance sheet to either be acquired by one of the big fish or perhaps to go public in on your own. And I guess that's what Series C funding is all about. It's how you take that transition and take that step to that later stage investment for scaling the substantial technical, clinical, and commercial progress that can make that happen. What do you think,
Yeah.
Ross?
Well, you danced around the E word, which everybody wants to talk about all the way back in Angel, which is the exit,
Yep.
right? So everybody will ask you from day one, hey, what's your exit? It's interesting that in the States, they tend to like to exit later than they do in the UK, which some investors, like one or the other, because venture capitalists, VCs, surprisingly, Sandy, they're not charities. They actually want to get paid. They generally want to get their money back once you've got to the VC in that sort of 5-10 year window. And so now I'm going to turn this around. All right, let's put the science guy to bed. Sandy, how exactly does a biotech company actually deliver return to these investors?
Yeah, so I guess there's two main exits, and an IPO, an initial public offering, or an M&A, merger and acquisition. I've been lucky in my experience. I've gone through that IPO
Is that
process.
right?
Yeah, it's been really
When are we going
interesting.
to do an IPO for this podcast?
Well, exactly. So an IPO is when the company lists on the stock market. And, prior to that listing, let me tell you, there's a lot of interest in what that initial market price is going to be. And everybody's looking at their share offer and thinking, am I going to be rich? Am I going to be,
Yeah.
where am I going to come out of all of this? But allowing the public to invest and the early investors to sell their shares, it's all about that process. But the landscape has been incredibly tough in this area lately. According to the Bioindustry Association, that's the BIA, and a 2025 report, no UK biotech companies have completed an IPO
Wow.
in 2025. That's really bad, isn't it? And so
That's
that's apparently the third successive year without a new public listing
that's crazy. So basically that's saying, at least for the moment, IPOs are kind of dead here. So, but I
in
mean,
the UK.
hopefully investors have found ways to cash out. So how's that going to work?
So mergers and acquisitions are the other sort of like strategic approach, and I guess being attractive to global medtech, biotech, pharmaceutical companies, having them come knock on the door. Actually, in that mix, acquisitions by global pharmaceutical companies are really the more dominant exit route right now. So they tend to have a lot of money to invest, and big biopharma companies have often had a kind of shrinking drug pipelines, so the new innovations maybe not necessarily there. So looking to scoop up those innovations from what's available on the market. So instead of inventing everything in house, they simply come along and buy a company that's exiting around Series B, Series C, exiting in the mergers and acquisition sense. So excellent targets for investment. And that's a massive strength in the UK in 2025. And we see a lot of activity and a lot of what we call liquidity in the ecosystem, where we see pharma investing in just this way.
Yeah, and this was actually interesting you mentioned all of this because I lived through and you did too, the transition where a lot of the basic biomedical research was done in these big pharma companies.
Hmm.
And I think it really sprung out of Genentech when they had that initial success, and then other biotech companies wanted to match that. And there was this big sweep. Many of my friends and family, I actually got caught up in that sweep. So when you were a scientist and weren't an academic, you often went to these big pharma and did research.
Hmm.
That really fell off, and it has come back a little bit, but it's, I would say, the bulk of, and correct me if I'm wrong, but the bulk of the new biomedical entities, drugs and so on, seems like they're really from biotech that has been snapped up by big pharma. So big
Yeah, I'd
pharma
agree.
waits till they get through that 2A, as we talked about, and then grabs them, which actually makes a lot more sense to me. Biotechs are always going to be, smarter, more efficient at coming up with new products. Do you agree with that?
I do agree with that. And it's very, very canny because, again, for our angels and our VCs are listening, you guys are carrying the risk, right? That's where you're taking the risk. You've got potentially big rewards, but the companies that are coming along and completing these M&As, they're essentially vesting, but they can see a lot clearer what they're getting. That you've absorbed the risk for
Yeah.
them. You've taken it through the clinical trials, and it's much clearer what they're actually getting at the end of the day.
Sure, sure. And I mean, I guess they're taking less risk, but they are very good clinical trial companies.
Yeah.
and also delivery once it's approved companies. So they are good at this for sure.
Yeah, precisely. Yeah. High stakes
Wow.
game. It's a high stakes game, and proving value is what it's all about. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, so Sandy, this is our crash course in venture capital. Obviously, we can go on for a while, but hopefully it's very clear. Just to remind everybody, we talked about pre-seed. So I'm a scientist or whatever. I'm at home and I suddenly have a bright idea. As I need money to work on that, I'm going to get pre-seed money initially, maybe from friends and family, but eventually from things like angels, though also foundations that will give you early funding, usually tens of thousands of pounds. And then once you get something that is heading through IND, investigational new device or drug, then you get into this Series A, Series B, or Series C. So that's my quick wrap up on that. We will talk next time more about more practical things about how one actually finds all of this. But for now, time to step out of our boardroom, step out of the investments, into our favorite closing segment, a wee bit of joy. So Sandy, once again, I know you're busting to tell us a little wee bit of joy, and I actually will love to hear this and a little bit about what you're going to say, but I'd love to hear it out. Why don't you start?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to coming back around on this topic because there's a lot more we can talk about. But yeah, you're absolutely right. It's time to have our wee closing segment, wee bit of joy. And well, Ross, it's impossible for me to talk about it this week without referring back to the fantastic trip I just made to Hong Kong. So Helen and I had a wonderful time. We were meeting up with some old friends recently. When we were out there, we got some amazing tips for things and places to see, places to visit. And one of my favorites was the Chai Lin Nunnery and Nan Lan Garden at Diamond Hill in Kowloon in Hong Kong. So the Chai Lin Nunnery is this large Buddhist temple complex. It's incredible. It was founded in 1934. So, historically, not that long ago. But they've created this amazing retreat for Buddhist nuns, which was updated in 1998. So a lot of things were updated around this period in Hong Kong, as it turns out. I guess it was a lot to do with the transition from UK administration back to China. But it's all been updated or sympathetically updated in line with the traditions of the Tang dynasty architecture. So that means there's this incredibly beautiful artwork, really inspiring garden. So I'll stick up some visuals so you can see what I'm talking about. But you'll immediately see and recognize those amazing kind of Chinese and Japanese influenced gardens. All the kind of Zen influence, the rakes, the gravel, the heavily pruned conifer trees. So absolutely beautiful. And there's so many amazing vistas as you stroll around this complex. You see the traditional architecture and the traditional gardens framed by these huge sky rises all around you, and then mountains in the distance. It's a complete mind melt.
That sounds wild.
Yeah, it really was. And there are so many things to really admire in terms of the artistry that we find there. However, there was one thing that I found that I think you'll be really interested in too, Ross. Have you ever heard of Chinese scholars' rocks?
No. Tell me.
Okay, so
I am intrigued.
Yeah, so these are known as gongxi, I believe, and they're these unusually shaped natural stones which are collected and then contemplated by Chinese scholars. So, incredible sort of patterns in the rocks and things, and I think they find these things very, very interesting. I guess it's important to say that scholars' rocks, they're not exclusively or even primarily kind of Buddhist relics or Buddhist objects. They're very much in the tradition of the Chinese literary culture, and also particularly influenced by things like Taoist ideas about nature and absorbing elements of Buddhism and Confucianism. So yeah, you can tell I'm kind of brimming with all this stuff now.
But buddy, I got to ask the obvious. Okay, so I'm channeling the audience here.
yeah.
We're talking about rocks, right? Obviously, it's a it's a rock. So, all right, tell me what is magical about these rocks?
Yeah, again, I'm going to have to make this visual so people can appreciate this because it does sound a bit odd, right? But these are like really weathered pieces of
Hey,
stone.
man, all rocks are weathered.
Yeah, but
Go for it.
they're collected because they're just so interesting. So the shapes that resemble like mountain peaks and cliffs, and you see the world in miniature in these things. So representing like caves and valleys, clouds, and maybe human or animal form, or they just have I guess they represent imaginary landscapes. So you
Mhm.
can surely that helps you to kind of place the imagery. You get large rocks that are in gardens with the gravel all intricately arranged around the rock, or you get smaller rocks, and these are the ones I really loved. These are carved and they're put on wooden bases, and you can have them in your study, Ross. So I mean,
Mm.
how inspiring is that? You're working all day and you're looking for inspiration. You glance around your room, and of course you recognize inspiration from the rock that's sitting in the corner of your study. Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
just assume this, I could be
Yeah.
wrong, that you brought me back one because of course I want one.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we'll have to wait and see. We'll have to wait and see when we meet up. You'll
All
have
right.
to, you're going to have to wait that one out.
I
But
think we
yeah,
have a
I mean,
golf date coming up, right?
yeah, exactly. Right. So next time we're on a golf date, you'll
You're just
find
going to
out
grab a rock,
what
aren't
I,
you? And you're going to hand it to me. Hey, this looks like a beagle.
yeah, yeah. No, no, don't thank me. Don't thank me, Ross.
Wow, my own beagle rock.
Oh
Thanks, man.
dear. Yeah. Anyway, I could go
It
into this.
sounds
I
amazing.
could go into this a ton, but I'm gonna wrap it up there because I don't think I can keep the room for this long. But just I guess one thing I'll leave you with is that one of the things I've learned is that that part of the world is deeply interconnected in the same way as we see in North America and Europe, etc. But influences from China, from Japan, from Korea, from Taiwan, they all kind of merge. And I think Hong Kong is one of those areas of fusion, right? And they've been really adept at taking multiple ideas and bringing them together. And I have just realized that these Zen influenced gardens, wow, I'm really into that, and I'm really into the whole philosophy around Buddhism as a result. So I've been really inspired. So that's my gift to the pod this week, is that I'm passing that inspiration back into the pod and into our audience, and you can
I
check it
love
out
it.
on the images. Yeah.
I love it. Yeah, no, Zen Buddhism, absolutely. I'm all there. Um, Maybe some point we'll have a podcast on talking about the intersections.
Yeah.
And as we were talking about this, and you were reminding me that Zen Buddhism is not really religion in the way that we think about in the West. It's as much a philosophy as anything, and it's a really interesting one, and it has aged very well, actually. So
Yeah.
totally agree.
Yeah.
Totally agree.
So Ross, your turn. What's been your wee bit of joy this week?
I don't know if I can beat rocks, so let me see what I can do.
I'm sure you can.
I don't know why I'm giving you a hard time. I actually think it's amazing. So I want to do something that's maybe a little less solid, I guess, which is so I'm going to start by saying a bunch of friends and I, and my wife and so on, we're going to head over this Saturday to Glasgow Science Center to their IMAX to see Christopher Nolan's The Odyssey. So that'll date
Yeah.
this podcast because it's just coming out now. And I have to say, I am super excited. You've got Nolan, you've got IMAX, Homer, Odysseus. I was just sort of reconnecting with Odysseus. It's a pretty amazing book. Basically Matt Damon running amok, trying to get home while God's completely ruined his life. So this, I'm here for that, right?
Yeah.
But actually, that's not the story I want to tell. That's the end of the story I want to tell. So I'd start in the end, just like a director, and I'm going to bring it around, just like a Nolan film.
Yeah.
Play with a little time here. What I really want to talk about is something that my wife and I have connected with on YouTube, and that is watching these little, mostly horror films, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, sometimes even 20 minutes,
Yeah.
For example, by Curry Barker. So there's a whole world of these directors. So
So
do you know Curry Barker?
this, no, this is a name I do not recognize. So I'm very intrigued to know more, Ross.
Good. I'm always excited to tell you something new. Because originally I didn't know Curry until fairly recently. But he has this YouTube channel which is called That's a Bad Idea, which is I think one of the best names for a channel I've ever heard. And he makes some comedy things, but even his so-called comedy shorts,
Yeah.
they have like a little weird edge to them. And so I can see where he then drifted really into little horror films. And
Okay.
so these are not big jump scares, nothing like that. They're more psychological thrillers. So it's one of those things. So nobody's running around with an axe.
Okay.
Um, it's just that somebody's like somebody's sitting in a living room, and then you realize that the living room, there's something weird about it. It's not really safe anymore.
Yeah.
So, for example, one example, probably one of his most famous ones, is called The Chair.
Wow.
And a man brings home an antique chair that he finds on the side of the street, and then everything around him starts to go bad. Okay, so is the chair haunted, or is he losing his mind? And I won't, of course, give it away, and a it doesn't give a clean punchline to it. You have to sort of deconstruct what you think is going on, but I think lots of clues are there. But it's a small film, it's cheap, and honestly, it's pretty creepy. There's Enigma, which is more of a I'm all alone and the world is about to end. So they've got like 6 days, 5 days, 4 days before the world ends. And it's a psychological piece. Some guy is facing the end of everything, but he's a human being. He's trying to figure out he's not going to do anything dramatic because he's just a guy. So it's really kind of interesting, but there's also a dread about it. There's another
Mm.
one warning. Someone go through all of it, but the guy just finds a note in his car. That's it. It's got a little warning in the note, and then things just kind of get weird from there. Like, what's the note? Who's putting the notes in there? That sort of thing.
Yeah.
So anyway,
Sounds intriguing, Ross. Sounds really,
yeah,
really intriguing, and I definitely want to watch these and find out more. So yeah, amazing
yeah.
tip. Yeah.
Yeah, so I heavily recommend it. There's a world of these, and it's not just Curry Barker. The reason I mention him is, of course, these little YouTube films are not trying to compete with Hollywood on scale. That
Yeah.
the limitations are actually part of the art. A
Mm.
chair. Now let's build a little thing around a note, a room, this kind of thing. Barker made a full length film called Milk and Cereal.
Okay.
It's one of these what's called found footage horror film where somebody happened to be filming and then bad things were happening. So you're just happening to look at somebody who happened to be filming things. He spent about $800 on it. And of course, it has many, many, many millions of views.
Yeah.
Um, and it's, about YouTube pranksters and way a joke can really go bad and go dark. He
Yeah.
actually tried to get distribution for it. Nobody picked it up. And he said, all right, screw it. I'll just put it on YouTube. And it went viral. And importantly, millions of views. People started to tell other people, like I'm telling you now.
Yeah.
And critics started to notice it. Horror fans noticed it. And all of a sudden, um, basically the industry started to take notice,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, and we see this is a really common route now, isn't it? How
It
to
is.
bring your low budget film to a huge international audience.
Totally. So this is where I'm landing here. So the old route was you get permission from a studio, you find a studio, you have an idea, you find the money, often 50, 100, more, 150 million. You get a studio, they choose you. This is very different. You initiate everything, you make it, you put it out for very little money, you
Yeah,
find the audience yourself. And basically, the audience decides who are the good ones at this, right? They're the
yeah,
gatekeepers. And then Barker makes this film Obsession. He made it for about 750,000, which for him was a lot of money. And it gets picked up and has now made over $400 million worldwide. I haven't seen it yet. I am busting to see it. I hear it's really great. And apparently it's absurd, but in the best of all possible ways. And you have to know that studio executives are sitting there thinking, I'm sorry, why did I just pay $200 million to make the Odyssey when I could, make for less than $1 million, I could get something that's probably going to make a good chunk of that money as well.
So I can see what's lighting you up here, Ross. It's
Yeah,
the disruption. But before I let you come back on that, if those investors that are listening, yeah, you're not going to get fulfillment by investing in making this much money. You're going to get investment. You're going to get fulfillment by investing in medtech and biotech. So yeah, but please,
totally, totally,
please tell
100%.
us
There's no money
more.
in filmmaking,
Yeah,
100%. So where I'm now going to land, what I'm going to finish here is, I feel like right now, like this month, is the passing of the torch, a new generation of filmmakers. So you have Curry Barker.
yeah,
Kane Parsons is another one of these YouTubers who made a film, Backrooms, you may have seen. It's an A24. Now it's an A24 film, was picked up. Also a horror film, also done on a tiny budget, and has made a wild amount of money. I hear it's amazing. It's also on our list. Um, so these filmmakers, they understand pacing, they understand dread, comedy, all that stuff, how to hold the audience attention. So they are professional filmmakers, and they know how to make films for tiny amounts of money. So this
yeah.
Saturday, we're going to go see The Odyssey. It'll be great. It'll be big cinema. I guess my question then is this one of the last great examples of the old model? Big director, big budget, big screen, whereas somebody like Curry Barker, give me a chair, okay, and a camera and $800, and I will make you a horror film that can make hundreds of millions of dollars. So just thinking about that, changing the guards, we can have guys on the big screen, but still somehow we can be terrified and entertained by a chair sitting in the middle of a room. What do you think?
I guess I kind of want both. I guess I'm greedy. I saw Formula One. Did you see Formula
I
One?
did. I did. It was
And that
good.
was IMAX as well. That was
Yeah,
all shot in 70 millimeter. That was absolutely awesome. And I'm super
I
excited
agree.
about the Odyssey as well. I think the Odyssey is going to be a spectacular movie.
100%.
But yeah, I think I want to kind of feast on all of these things.
Well, where I
Yeah,
think I'm going to land on that, I just had this conversation with somebody this morning. Where I think I'm going to land on this is, oh, it was my daughter. Where I'm going to land on this is, I think what's happening is that these young YouTubers are showing the studios there's a different economic model.
yeah,
And at the same time, AI is entering the scene, right?
yeah,
And so I wonder if what's going to happen is you're going to hit a reset button. You're going to start making these less expensive films, and then they will start to ratchet up the way the original filmmaking did as the
yeah.
technology starts to feed into it. And so you'll get your F1, but it'll be, CGI. What do you think?
Yeah, yeah. I think you could be hitting on exactly where things are likely to move. I mean, I hope that doesn't happen in the sense that I still really appreciate all of the skill and artistry in the kind of in the raw form. The giving the filmmaker the opportunity rather than doing and adding the interesting stuff, post processing using AI. I'd still like to see live action. I'd still like to see the live shot.
Uh-huh.
And I don't know. I'm probably a sucker for that, but maybe that's on its way out, Ross. I don't know.
Ah, what I like about it, I understand, I 100% understand what you're saying, but what I do like
Yeah,
about this is this will open up filmmaking to people that are not associated with studios.
yeah,
And I wonder if that's going to like break open, in China. And then I promise I will stop this whole thing. In China, there's a whole bunch of these little, like, little almost like TV like dramas that are being posted now. And they're
mm,
completely AI developed and driven.
yeah,
And it's a whole world of that. And so I just think what you lose in that sort of human, ensemble and all
yeah,
those interactions, you gain by bringing out these new minds that can put things up and say, "Hey, look at this."
yeah, yeah. I think
You're
one
not
of the other
buying
things. Yeah, no, I am buying it.
it.
I totally am, and I guess one of the things that I was also inspired with Hong Kong, and I'll kind of wrap up my point here as well. We stumbled upon the statue of Bruce Lee, and it
Mm,
immediately brought me back to all of those incredible movies that emanated from Hong Kong at that time. and also the inspiration. I think the genuine inspiration for Blade Runner was the kind of, the dark and rainy atmosphere and high rise
Sure.
downtown Hong Kong.
God, I love Blade
I
Runner.
don't think it was Tokyo. I think it was Hong Kong that was really the true inspiration. And
Probably, yeah.
yeah. And certainly that's what, I was talking to one of our friends there about that just when we were out there. But yeah, I mean, I think I find all of these different art forms inspirational. I don't really want to be without one or the other. I think just add more. I guess I'm greedy that way, Ross.
All right, my friend.
But I love the disruption. I love the fact you brought the disruption to the piece. Yeah.
Yeah. So, well, this brings us to the end. What do you think, Sandy?
Yeah, let's wrap up here for today. But we're going to continue this discussion around funding and hopefully impart more background and some additional insight into how you get your startup off the ground and how you navigate this funding landscape and take your research forward. And we'll do that in the next pod, Ross.
Yeah, so we'll get more of your wisdom.
Thank you.
And sharpen up.
Yeah.
Definitely looking forward to it. So until next time, everybody, please keep the heed and best of luck playing the long game.
Yeah, see the vision clear. We're here to run the long game. Blueprint set, no fear. Playing out the long game. The long game. Hey, the long